Hello and welcome to Paper Traders, your show where two average Joes try to beat the market. I am your co-host, Eric, and I'm here with Danny Mack. And today we have a special guest. Before we do that, we're going to do some house cleaning. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and leave a comment on our page. And be sure to leave a question, because we are here live with our guest, Dave Borun.
Yeah.
Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So basically, you kind of know the gist of the show. We try to beat the market and making picks, and we don't try to get too crazy about it. And we try to make some smart choices, and we hope on the pros here to educate us on what we should be looking for and doing, etc. And
Sure.
We had Nina on last week, and we were talking about the Vice ETF.
Yeah, some really fun ETFs, I would say.
Yeah, a bunch of fun ETFs that are currently kind of crazy and going up and down and currently a little bit down, which would be the marijuana stocks. And you happen to be the marijuana innovators editor here at Zacks. But before you get into that, why don't we get a little bit of background on you, where you started, how you started, and even if you remember what your first trade was.
My first trade. Yeah, sure. I definitely remember my first trade. I'll get to that in a second. I started out of college as a stockbroker, a retail stockbroker, moved into the options markets, and was an options market maker on the SIBO, the ISE, the Chicago Merc, the Board of Trade, the P Coast Exchange for 17 years. So most of my background is in derivatives and options trading. Came to Zacks about a year and a half ago, just as marijuana stocks were really starting to become a real significant investment opportunity. And it just happened to fit really well with some of my interests and knowledge. And I've been real excited to do the Marijuana Innovators since we started it back in March. Now, as you mentioned as well, the stocks have not been performing well. Marijuana stocks have been brutalized this year after a couple years of really sensational performance. It's been a very difficult year. The ETFs are down somewhere between 30 and 50% each. Individual stocks, some of them are even worse. There have been a couple of scandals. One company went out of business. Another company filed for bankruptcy. So it's been a difficult investing environment. But we're still in the very, very early innings, and I'm still extremely optimistic. All right, first trade.
Your first trade.
I was going to say, don't forget the first trade.
Stock called Zoma. And this is going to, I'm glad you asked, because this is going to be interesting when we start talking about the marijuana biotechs. And I bought it in 1990, late 94, early 95, and I still own those shares. It's been the subject of reverse split. I think I turned $2,000 into about, I don't know, it's worth about $50 or $60 right now. So my first trade was a complete disaster and a lesson in what happens to biotech stocks that have a limited number of products when something doesn't go well.
Don't fall in love with your stocks, Dave. Don't fall in love with your stocks.
You know what? I bet there's more people out there than that we realize have done that big mistake like you, Dave. I know I made mistakes in the stock market before, so I don't think you're alone on that endeavor that you had to go through on your first trade.
Sure.
Are you still hoping for it to bounce back, or are you just holding it for a reminder? Is it just back there?
It's almost a souvenir now.
Yeah, right.
That's what I'm saying. Is it just there to remind you, don't do this again? Don't do this again.
Well, no, actually, here's the thing. I mean, the fact that it was my first trade and it didn't work out well, that was a great learning experience. I learned things from that. I've almost certainly done more not almost certainly. I've 100% done more losing trades in my life than winners. But I'm up money because the winners make more money than the losers. And so, no, I'm not afraid to take a loss at all. And I would rather take a swing than stand there and watch something happen and not be involved. So, no, I don't regret it a tiny bit.
That's a good lesson to learn, and that's a good lesson for everybody listening out there to kind of take home, because you got to have a little bit of a strong stomach, I think, in not only the market today but in the stock market in general. So kind of going from what you said though on the stock performance this year for the marijuana industry, I mean, you would think that it would be going the other way. You have 11 states that are legal recreational, you have 33 that are medical, and you have now CBD and hemp that is federally legal across the board. So,
and didn't they just open up the banking to the marijuana industry?
Yeah, that was another big thing. So, I guess what's
What's
causing
going
this
on?
downfall in the marijuana industry right now?
Okay, well, since you mentioned the banking, let's do that one first.
Yeah.
They haven't quite opened it yet. The Safe Banking Bill, which prohibits federal regulators from targeting banks or lending institutions with fines or penalties for dealing with marijuana companies, passed the House of Representatives, which is a huge step, and it sailed through. All but one Democrat and 90 Republicans voted for it. So it went through on a sort of accelerated process where they needed 2/3, and they got 2/3, no problem.
Yeah, everybody seemed to be on board.
It's still got to go to the Senate, though, and that's
Womp womp.
so you got the Republican-controlled Senate. Mitch McConnell has shown no desire or incentive to put a marijuana bill on the floor for a full vote, even if it's something as simple as just straightening out the banking regulations. So we got an uphill battle there. So it's not quite passed yet. Big step forward, but
That'd be huge.
got a way to go. It'd be huge because right now, and a lot of people don't know this, I'm surprised at how many people I talk to aren't aware that in the United States, all the businesses that have anything to do with the marijuana plant operate entirely in cash.
Yep.
They take cash from their customers. There's an ATM in the hallway of retail businesses. They pay suppliers and employees and their rent and the IRS in cash, and sometimes huge amounts of cash, like 7-figure amounts of cash.
You'd think that the government would want their chunk.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because I think that may be the incentive to get this thing through the Senate, is that it makes it very, very difficult for the government to have an audit trail that allows them to get their cut when everything's happening in cash. Now, most of the businesses, as far as I can tell, are scrupulously honest because they don't want to lose their license. So even though they're dealing with piles of ones, they're writing everything down. They're trying their best to document everything as perfectly as they possibly can.
Because at this point, the floodgate's been opened, right? Like, it's not like the government's going to turn around and take that license away and say, sorry, guys, we changed our mind. Marijuana is now illegal again.
Well, I actually was reading, that's kind of funny, because I was reading something that they have a law that has passed. I forget the exact name of it, but it is renewed every year on the basis of a budget. So there is something that the federal government could take away and actually make it illegal again for these states to operate. Like, they could actually come in and...
They could, but they know how much money is being made. There's no way they don't want a piece of it.
Right, so that's not a risk that we should be...
You're in California, Dave. How much money last year did California get in revenue from marijuana?
Okay, well, that's a funny question, too. California actually sold... Less marijuana was sold in the state of California in 2018 when it became recreationally legal than was sold in 2017 when it was only medicinally legal. About $3 billion in 2017, about $2.5 billion in 2018.
Yeah, not million, billions.
Billion,
You
yeah,
know the
like
government
60.
wants that cut. You could just see Mitch McConnell, once he sees those numbers, just salivate a little bit and realize how much spending he could do.
Now, so far, the California tax revenues are creeping up again in 2019, but the big issue has been the black market. Even though there are clean, well-lit stores with courteous, knowledgeable employees and anything you want to buy available to anyone who wants it, as long as you're over 21,
Very important.
There's a lot of tax. So a black market continues to exist, and in some cases thrive. And part of it is that they're used to it. The people that have been consuming marijuana for a long time have been going to the black market guy that they know forever. And he's
not normally some creepy dude. He's somebody they've known forever who lives down the block, who's a nice guy, has a family, but...
Or it could be some creepy guy.
Yes, yeah, I'm probably. I think that's going away. This is my personal hypothesis, is that nobody grows their own tobacco. Nobody distills their own alcohol, because you can get really high quality, inexpensive versions of anything you want at the corner store. Right?
And not all the time involved.
Right. And the fact that the government charges you a little bit of tax on the pack of cigarettes or the bottle of booze you want, it really doesn't deter anyone from buying it from a retail location. So I think there's these old habits where people are continuing to go to the black market, but that's going to go away. It has been a drag on the performance of marijuana stocks, though. This is not unrelated to the fact that these stocks aren't performing well, and that's that legal sales aren't accelerating at the kind of rates that people guessed.
Also, it's funny that you bring up that whole tax incentive and the fact that the black market still exists, because I know that here in Illinois, we're going to be legalizing on January 1st, and I have read the exact same hypothesis here, because Illinois' taxes are going to be so frickin' high, apparently, that pretty much all the analysts are saying that they're just going to support the black market even more. There will be stores that people will still go to them, But
Sure.
long story short, it's like you just said, it's going to be more expensive than just going to their old dealer, so to speak.
And that's a delicate balancing act for governments as they approach legalization, because obviously one of the biggest incentives for people who might socially not agree with the fact that marijuana is legal, to get them to support legislation to legalize it, the tax thing is a pretty big carrot, right? So you have to promise people who don't personally like the idea of marijuana being legal that it's going to be a net win for the government in terms of revenues. But if you make those taxes too high, you end up stifling the legal market and keeping the black market alive. So there's a very, very thin line they have to walk between collecting the revenues they need to make it a successful piece of legislation, make everyone happy in government, versus don't choke out the legal dealers who are paying licensing fees and taxes and have a hard time competing on the basis of price with illicit dealers.
I really wish I could show this chart right now while you were, telling us about what's going on there with the taxes and the balance there. That's going to be a huge issue here as well. I'm looking at the tax revenue chart from the Colorado.gov website, and it's just showing pretty much what Zacks would call a perfect chart. Danny, can we pull that up, or are we not available?
Yeah, well, it looks like we got it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah,
you can show the viewers. I know what it looks like, right?
Yeah, it's just a
basically
perfect chart.
Line. They hit $1 billion and just kept screaming up. Yeah,
it's just a perfect straight line. So I mean, Colorado seems to have gotten the mix right, so to speak. It looks like, because I mean, it's a pretty constant up. Even the dips there don't go lower than their last high. I mean, it's actually kind of perfect. And that, in Illinois, I don't know how this is going to work out, because we're going to have such a hard time with the taxes and the taxes that already exist. You talked about cigarettes and everything else. I remember a couple of years ago when Chicago decided to instill a soda pop tax, people went up in arms
and the bag tax
started leaving the state and the county to go get their soda. They'd go to Indiana to save themselves the $2 on a case just to stick it to the state.
Right.
And I mean, this gets into a much more complicated issue about the taxes in Illinois in general and the flight from the state. But I mean, this marijuana thing, just I as a person that's watched from the sidelines this whole thing, I just cannot believe that this isn't just a multi-billion-dollar market that isn't just turning out billionaires, so to speak.
Well, it could soon enough. I mean, they're talking about it being a 9-point-some billion-dollar industry within the next couple of years.
What's it currently estimated to be at, Dave? What's the?
Well, so you're talking about in the U.S. or North America. So right now, I believe it's roughly $20-25 billion in sales in North America annually.
Huge. That's so
huge. A lot of it is still off the books, though.
Right.
And because of the odd legal patchwork in the U.S., the amount of taxes that get collected are spotty all over the place.
Well,
I think that's temporary, right? That's going to get sorted out. When you look at that Colorado chart, that's almost 6 years now. They legalized it recreational at the beginning of 2014, right? Yep. So they're about to finish their 6th year. It takes time for large groups of people to come around to an idea and realize what the most efficient way to do it is. And so at the beginning, I think there's a lot of people that have a specific interest, a specific financial interest, or a specific political or moral interest in a certain thing. And then the markets just sort of have to work those things out over time. It's going to happen. It's going to happen across our country.
Right. And kind of stemming off of that, I mean, we see that we want the federal government to kind of get involved, but we also see a lot of negatives happening, kind of as we said. And going off of that, I wanted to ask, with all these bans happening on vaping and the FDA kind of doing a lot of probing into what's going on in that very serious situation with people going to the hospital and getting very ill, do you think that this type of kind of scenario will push the federal government to step in to say, look, if this is going to be sold, maybe we should, as the government, regulate this a little bit more closely so that these types of things don't happen and these types of epidemics. So I guess as in a whole,
to be a licensed distributor, you got to be fairly highly regulated as it is. I mean, they're not just allowing shops to open up on the street and start creating vape carts.
No, I didn't think so, but you see this kind of happening across, America right now, and usually you kind of see, with this negative, the government wants to kind of say, hey, okay, let's kind of start to do our part now. Is this something that you could see maybe pushing a federal legalization kind of anytime soon, or?
That's a good point. I'm glad you asked. The answer is yes, and I hope so, but it could also go the other way. As a matter of fact, I just wrote in Marijuana Innovators last night about this vaping issue, and it's serious, and it's had a pretty significantly negative effect on the marijuana stocks.
Well, that's been primarily from the illegal markets, hasn't it? It hasn't been reputable dealers that are getting caught. Like Cresco, for example, in Illinois, it wasn't a Cresco lab that got it caught. There was some kid in Wisconsin that got busted with like 40,000 carts that he was making in his basement or something.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely, and I wish we heard more of that story, because that story would push it more, would push us in the direction of, let's regulate this in a sensible way and make sure that whatever people can buy is a safe product, not a basement product. Right? I don't like to use the alcohol analogy a lot, but I'm going to take it back.
Bathtub gin.
You don't buy bathtub gin from your buddy.
Right.
It's dangerous. It's inconsistent quality. It's garbage, and the amount of money you save is negligible. Right? So you
might go blind.
You go to a store and you buy something from a major brand. Marijuana's gonna be that way, but we got to get rid of this basement and back alley crap manufacturing processes that are hurting people and in some cases killing people, and make sure that the government sensibly regulates what people can buy. It doesn't mean that it's good for you. It doesn't mean that the government is condoning or sponsoring marijuana. It just means that if people are going to buy it anyway, it's the role of the government to figure out that what they're buying is as safe as it can possibly be.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about government now, because you have Canada that is, we'll call it federally legal. I mean, how is this affecting their industry, and how is this affecting their markets?
So that's also been weighing on the vape thing, and Canada have been weighing on the marijuana stocks, because it's been legal in Canada for just shy of a year now. It was October of last year, but it's only been dried flower products, no edibles, no vape products on the legal recreational market. This year, starting in October on the 17th, although the products won't actually be available for another month or two after that, edibles and vape products are going to be made available for the first time. The regulations in Canada are very, very tight. It was extremely difficult for producers, distributors, retailers to get an adequate amount of product to sell to the public when it became legal, specifically because the regulations are so onerous. Now,
Canada there were shortages, I remember, once they went and legalized.
They were the first major country to do it, and they were overly cautious in every way they possibly could be, because they didn't want to have some sort of huge public health crisis that they created by being careless. So it's totally understandable, but it has been stifling to the business of cannabis in Canada. When I was under the impression, I was of the belief that once edibles and vapes became available in Canada, a huge number of people that were not marijuana users or enthusiasts before were going to get to try a little bit of something that they were going to like a lot, and the market was going to open up well past the people that have already been purchasing marijuana into a much wider audience.
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous that the vape problems, the headlines that we've seen, especially, we're talking about people that are like in the ICU and dead. It's not just like, oh, this is not good for you. It's like, this could actually like kill you now.
Very serious.
That's going to scare a lot of people away, I'm afraid that that's going to at least slow down the initial adoption of new forms of marijuana ingestion in Canada. I was hoping that was going to be a big positive for the industry, and instead, this vape thing, I think, is really going to put a lid on that.
Well, with all the negative that is surrounding this industry right now, it seems like, as we said earlier in the podcast, there's still a lot of potential going forward over the next decade at least. So I guess I wanted to kind of touch on if you have any growth potential that you see specifically, because we have talked, there is a lot of different sections, I guess, of the marijuana industry. There's the medical, recreational, and then now the CBD and hemp. So is there any growth potential that we could specifically look at as an investor? What should we be watching out for with this kind of huge downturn that we've seen here in this industry?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so those are three things, and I'll take them one at a time. First, in the
Sorry to throw them all at you at once.
no, it's great. I love it. Perfect, and a good breakdown from you. In the medical industry, and by medical now I mean legitimate pharmaceuticals, companies that come up with an experimental idea, go through 3 stages of FDA approval, document all the side effects, and come up with an FDA-approved prescription drug that you get from a doctor and a pharmacy. There's exactly one of those in the United States right now, Epidiolex from GW Pharma. I believe there's going to be a lot of those. Right? So the compounds present in marijuana, THC, CBD, and a lot of the other terpene compounds are going to be the basis for legitimate pharmaceuticals that have been thoroughly tested and make a significant difference in all sorts of disease processes. So growth there, yes, 100%. The DEA recently significantly streamlined the process for people that want to do medical research to obtain marijuana. Until recently, there was one legal source in the United States. It was the University of Mississippi.
It was like
had a supply of marijuana that's, I don't exactly know the details, but apparently the researchers say that it's of relatively poor quality. It's hard to get when they can even get it, and when they get it, it's junk and they can't really do anything with it. So in the very near future, legitimate medical research is going to be able to obtain all sorts of kinds of marijuana of various levels of all the compounds in it that show promise. And we're going to see a lot more drugs, pharmaceutical drugs that are based on the cannabis plant. Recreational. Yeah, just like I mentioned in Canada. So Canada has about 30 million citizens. We have about 10 times that amount. When Americans get over the stigma about marijuana being dangerous, illegal, etc., and start enjoying a little bit of some very specific marijuana products, especially edibles. Again, I thought vapes was going to be that. Vapes is looking pretty rough right now. I hope we can get the safety issues sorted out. And honestly, I'm going to digress a little bit. Your lungs is not the best way to ingest a drug. It works because there's a lot of blood vessels in your lungs. It's meant for getting oxygen in your blood. It also means you can get a drug in your blood. It's why smoking a cigarette is satisfying for smokers. It's why people, when they smoke marijuana, they get the effect immediately. But really, like, there's nothing else that we responsibly put into our lungs on purpose. So there's going to be better ways to ingest, safer ways to ingest. And I think
I'm waiting for snortable marijuana. I'm sure that's coming.
So the worst, nose is worst. I mean, like, the second.
I can't imagine that ever happening.
But it takes some patience. It takes a long time. So I think that we're in the United States, the recreational market is going to open up vastly beyond what it is right now, even in the states where it's legal, to all sorts of people who will use marijuana the exact same way that they have a beer or a glass of wine with their friends after work.
It just becomes another vice, per se.
Hemp CBD, I think most of it right now, I don't know, what's our level of profanity on this show? It's BS.
No, yeah, throw it all out there.
There's a bottle of CBD shampoo in my shower right now that I just saw this morning that someone gave my wife for her birthday. Garbage. It's a garbage idea. It doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah, how are you going to even absorb it? That's silly.
So, while I think that the compound cannabidiol will become the basis of a lot of the pharmaceuticals, I think most of the consumer CBD products right now are just snake oil, and I don't think
I totally would agree with that.
Flame out.
I would totally agree with that. Actually, so recently, to bring a personal story into this, my father, had a hip surgery, and to avoid using, what is it called, any sort of opiate,
Sure.
he decided to try CBD, and it worked for him. So now he's been using it in therapy and everything else, and his doctor's like, hey, if it works, keep it going. But it's not like he went to a reputable place to go get it. He went to his local tobacco shop that happened to have a sign up saying we have CBD. So it kind of makes me wonder the same thing you're saying, like all these guys selling snake oil, like, yeah, GW Pharmaceuticals is the big company to probably make the real drug, but there's so many different providers, and it seems like, I went past we still have video rental stores here in Illinois, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
So I drove past what's it called, a Family Video, and they had a sign in the window, looking to, change your night. try some CBD. I
I've
was
seen
like,
that too. Yeah.
what is this? You can just seem to find it anywhere. Gas stations, and it's crazy to me how it's just kind of exploded onto the markets. And
Yeah.
like you said, there's so many people. It's like, who is the reputable company to buy from?
Sure. The quantity and quality of those products is completely unknown. When people test it either contains no CBD or lots of CBD, or sometimes has a little THC in it too. Like it's the Wild West in that. And the claims that they're making are, quite frankly, pretty unbelievable.
So as an investor, it's more safe to kind of stick with the medical and well, I guess recreational will have to wait for due to the banking issues and stuff. Is that correct, or is there any true pure play here in the United States, or are they all based in, I guess, Canada?
Well, so there's an exchange listing issue. So there are no pure play producers of marijuana that are listed on the NYSE or the NASDAQ. Because you specifically can't be engaged in a business that's federally illegal and be listed on those exchanges. So the Canadian companies, as long as you don't sell marijuana in the United States, you can be a Canadian company operating under the applicable federal law in Canada and still be listed on the U.S. exchanges. I mean, it's a little bit inefficient, but it's going to take, even past the banking issue, it's going to take a more wide-scale legalization legislation before you can trade a U.S.-based producer, distributor, or retailer of marijuana products. Again, I'm going to keep saying this as if I have a crystal ball and I know for sure. It's going to happen. It's just not yet. So no, right now we can't buy any U.S. companies that are selling marijuana. Beyond the Safe Banking Act, the next big thing is going to be the States Act. The States Act is essentially, the Safe Banking Act is very narrowly focused on the issue of financial services. The States Act is much more broad and allows states to basically make their own decision without any federal interference about how they want to govern marijuana. If they want to completely prohibit it, great. If they want to allow it in any way, medicinal, recreational, whatever they want, federal government stays out of it. That would be a huge one. And that would allow companies that are involved in the business in the U.S. to list on the major exchanges. That's going to be our big blow up in the number and the quality of the stocks that we can invest in that are engaged in this business.
In the U.S. market.
Yeah.
So are REITs then a way to play here in the States, or do you feel like those are a risky biz?
You're talking about innovative industrial properties mostly?
Well, I was going to get to that.
Popped
So,
into my
fine.
head.
Now that we're,
Oh.
hold on. Before we get to that, Danny, let it roll.
Okay.
It's time to go to the battleground.
Oh man, I wasn't ready. There we go.
Okay, so this is the battleground. This is where we kind of talk about stocks more in depth. And seeing as that you do run Marijuana Innovators, like let's jump in and see what you got, and give us something that we can play on here. Because I'm looking for a Vice stock. I want something in that industry. I think it's gonna blow up. Help me find my way, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I'd be kind of curious to hear your 2 cents on IIPR, which is the Innovation Industrial Properties, which Eric said was a REIT. So they do a lot of buying of commercial property for, I guess, people who are growing the marijuana itself. So do you have any thoughts on that kind of play? Because I think that is one of the only, I guess, marijuana plays you could do right now.
I'm looking at the portfolio right now, and the only REIT I'm seeing is Innovative Industrial. So
yeah,
educate us, Dave.
Which is good, right? So they are in a very unique position that they've created for themselves, and right now there's no competition. They purchase the property. They generally purchase the properties actually from people that are already engaged in cultivation, and then lease it back to them.
Oh man, that sounds awful.
It's really good. It's an incredible business. If you are a cultivator and you need capital to expand your business, you want to buy equipment, you want to hire more people, you want to open up new distribution channels, you need an infusion of capital. And because of the restriction in the capital markets, because you can't get normal banking and financial services, that's hard to come by. IIPR goes to the public markets, raises cash with equity sales, and then goes and purchases the cultivation properties, typically also invests in improvements for the properties that make them more useful for the tenants, and leases them back at hugely attractive rates compared to the commercial real estate market.
Oh, really? I was going to say they inflated them. I was like, oh, yeah, let me buy your property, make it all pretty.
No, they do inflate.
Boom, there's your rent.
It sounds like they're doing the complete opposite.
So for the cultivator, they're paying really high rent, but they get a huge infusion of capital. IIPR reaps the benefits. So I mean, like a cap rate in commercial properties might be 3 to 6%. IIPR gets like 15%, with built-in annual ratchet ups. It's an incredible business. Every time they raise money in the markets, people go, "Oh, they diluted the shares," and within a few months, they've put everything to work, all on new properties that are all spitting out money like a golden goose.
Right.
IIR is the best thing in cannabis right now because it's a U.S. listed company operating in the U.S., not touching the plant, so it can be listed on major exchanges, and it's a money machine. Excellent dividends.
Those fringes.
Yeah, it's really great. Now, my only concern about IIPR is that right now they're capitalizing on the fact that they were a first mover and they have expertise, especially in the sort of minutia of zoning, licensing, all the little like annoying crap that goes along with being a non-conventional landlord. They're really good at it, right? So they can get these projects done and running quickly, whereas other people are finding they have to get through a bunch of bureaucratic red tape that they're not necessarily familiar with to do the same thing. Eventually, other people are going to catch up. IIPR is not going to be the only company buying and leasing back marijuana properties. But for now, yeah, no, it's a money machine. That's my favorite one.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I know we've looked at it before here on the podcast, so I feel like it's a win for us because I feel like as not an investor in it, but someone who's been looking at it, it's a win. So maybe we should definitely throw that on the actual watch list for us.
I might add it. While you guys have the next question, I'm going to take a look at the chart and see if I throw it in. Because I've been waiting for a play for a while, and I feel like that time has come. I need to pull the trigger. I've been watching in the fringes for a while.
Okay. I guess playing off of the Canada stocks, and like we said, there isn't really too many pure plays here in the United States that are actually listed on the NASDAQ or NYSE. Is there any stocks that we should be kind of keeping an eye on as investors in Canada or elsewhere that we should be looking at?
Okay. Yeah. So in the Marijuana Innovators portfolio, we only add stocks that are listed on major U.S. exchanges, have enough analyst coverage for us to compile a Zacks rank and to allow our customers to do their own research using our tools, just like any other stock that we have in the Zacks universe. That leaves out all the over-the-counter stocks. And that's a good idea, right? I want there to be a consistent amount of research availability for anyone that's interested in these things. But it does leave out a couple of interesting stocks, and so I'm going to tell you about one of them. Acreage Holdings is a U.S.-based multi-state operator with a total vertical integration in production, distribution, and retail. Sports ex-Speaker of the House John Boehner on the board of directors, as well as an ex-Prime Minister of Canada.
Sorry.
Sure, you can boo it all you want, but he's funny. He's not about social conservatism.
Oh, I know, but I'm just booing the boner.
Yeah, I know. I understand. They're very well connected politically by design. And they also have a 3.4, well, the value changes because it's based on the value of Canopy Growth. But Canopy Growth has an offer to buy them for, at the beginning, it was $3.4 billion, which they put down $300 million in cash to start. And they have 7 years to pay off the rest of it in Canopy stock, but only on the condition that marijuana is legalized for recreational use in the U.S. Acreage is trading for less than $1 billion in market cap right now. So well under the deal price. Means that people are discounting the idea that that's going to happen in the next 7 years. I think it's going to happen in the next 7 years. I think it's an easy bet. So I would encourage investors to take a look at Acreage, specifically with regard to the details of the Canopy buyout deal, and see if you don't think that's worth a little bit of a punt. This is not your retirement money trade. This is not your kid's college fund trade. But for an investor who thinks, oh, you know, I could afford to roll the dice on a pot stock, I think I would vote for Acreage.
What's the ticker on that one, Dave?
ACGRF.
Are we looking up there?
I'm trying to look it up right now so I can add it to our watch list. Seeing as you decided to talk about it, we might as well keep an eye on it. Acreage Farms.
Yeah,
stock. Here we go.
Oh, you got it?
I'm looking it up. It's under.
I'm sorry, I said it wrong. ACRGF.
ACRGF.
Yep.
ACR.
You're just wanting to trip Eric up. That was
Yeah,
it,
it
right?
is. That's what it is. It doesn't look like Zacks covers that one. So
We do not. It's an OTC stock, so we don't have analyst coverage. We don't have normal research tools. This is not, again, this is not your retirement money. This is your gambling money.
Yeah, this seems like
it's worth
an investment that you have to do a lot of research on and be very diligent on what you're picking and kind of how you're going about investing in this actual industry. So I just want to kind of take the moment and say thank you for coming on today, because we have a lot of information to kind of sift through. I'm sure all of our listeners are very gracious of you kind of giving us all that information, because there is a lot going on, and I'm sure a lot of people were kind of curious on why it was so down lately in the market. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on.
Well, great. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Dave, you better believe you're going to be back, because we got a lot more questions, a lot more to go through, and I'm sure that this entire market is just going to be a crazy whirlwind cycle for the next year or two. Hopefully not 7, but
hopefully not 7.
But yeah, you will definitely be back, and thank you for joining us today. And to all you here watching on Paper Traders, thank you so much. Be sure to check out Ben Rains, who's on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 o'clock. And be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and let us know what you think and who you want to hear from. And with that, we'll see you next Wednesday.
Peace.